Welcome to Curious Nightmares, the channel where your fears and deepest curiosities collide. Prepare for spine-tingling tales and eerie explorations into the supernatural. Subscribe and stay tuned for hair-raising stories.
True Terror, Unleashed, The Curse Within. From the outset, I should have known better. But curiosity, as they say, often leads to unforeseen paths, some darker than others. My journey into terror began on an ordinary autumn evening when I stumbled upon an old journal in my grandmother's attic. The journal, bound in faded leather and dust, belonged to my great-grandfather, a man whose existence was rarely spoken of in our family. As I flipped through the brittle pages, a sense of unease crept over me. The writings, though in a sophisticated yet simple English, depicted a man deeply entangled in the macabre and unexplainable. He wrote of a house not far from where I lived, a structure shrouded in local legends and whispered fears. It was said to be cursed, a place where reality bent and horrors from beyond preyed upon the living. My great-grandfather's obsession with this house was evident in his detailed descriptions and the frantic nature of his entries. It was as if he was slowly being consumed by the darkness he so fervently pursued. Compelled by a mix of family history and a desire to understand the man behind the journal, I set out to find this mysterious house. It stood at the edge of town, hidden behind overgrown foliage, its presence almost suffocating. The once grand Victorian architecture was now but a decaying shell, its windows like hollow eyes staring into the abyss. As I stepped inside, the air grew cold and a suffocating silence enveloped me. The house, though abandoned, felt alive, as if breathing with a slow, methodical rhythm. I moved cautiously, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. In the living room, I found it, a painting. It depicted a scene so surreal yet disturbingly vivid. A figure, shrouded in shadows, stood in the center, its face obscured, but its gaze seemed to pierce right through me. The more I looked, the more unnerved I became. It was as if the figure was communicating, whispering secrets meant only for me. The house began to reveal its horrors as night fell. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that defied logic. Whispers filled the air, voices of despair and anguish, so real I could almost feel their breath on my neck. Every room told a story of tragedy and darkness, a history written in pain and sorrow. I should have left, but I couldn't. The house had a hold on me, drawing me deeper into its web. In the basement, I found the culmination of my great-grandfather's obsession. A ritual circle, its symbols unknown yet eerily familiar. In the center, a single word was carved into the ground: return. That's when the true horror began. The house trembled, a low growl resonating from its very foundations. The shadows coalesced into forms, grotesque and twisted, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I was surrounded, trapped in a nightmare that was all too real. In my terror, I realized the chilling truth. My great-grandfather had never left this place. His spirit, or what remained of it, was bound to the house, a prisoner of his own making. And now, the house wanted me, to take his place, to continue the legacy. I ran, or at least I tried to. The corridors twisted and turned, leading me in circles. The house was alive, changing its layout, playing with me like a cat with a mouse. Just when I thought I was lost, I saw it. The front door, my escape. I burst out into the night, gasping for air, the house looming behind me. But as I looked back, a chilling realization dawned on me. The painting, the figure in the shadows. It wasn't just a depiction of some unknown horror. It was a portrait, and the face hidden in the darkness was mine. The story doesn't end there, though. For now, wherever I go, I feel the house's presence, a shadow that follows me, whispering, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it call my name, a siren song luring me back to its embrace, and I fear one day I might just listen. The days that followed my escape from the house were a blur of sleepless nights and paranoia. Shadows seemed to move with sinister intent, and the faintest of whispers made me jump. The line between reality and nightmare had become perilously thin. One particularly stormy night, as lightning forked across the sky, I saw it again, the figure from the painting. It stood outside my window, its form obscured by the torrential rain, yet its presence was unmistakable. Every flash of lightning seemed to bring it closer, until it was but a pane of glass away. I cowered in my bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child, hoping it was just a trick of the light. But when I dared to look again, the figure was inside, standing at the foot of my bed. Its face, still shrouded in darkness, tilted as if examining me, deciding my fate. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread filled the room. I wanted to scream, to run, but fear had rooted me to the spot. The figure leaned closer, and in a voice that was both a whisper and a scream, it said, "You cannot escape your legacy." The next morning, I convinced myself it was just a nightmare, a product of my frayed nerves. But the illusion of safety shattered when I found a trail of muddy footprints leading from my window to my bed. They were my size, my shape, but I had no recollection of making them. Desperate for answers, I returned to my grandmother's attic, rummaging through old family albums. What I found chilled me to the bone. There, in a photo dated back to the late 1800s, stood the house, and in front of it, a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to me. The family resemblance was undeniable, but the implication was impossible, yet there it was, staring me in the face. It was then I realized that the house, and the figure within, were not just calling out to a descendant. They were calling to me specifically, across time and space. It was as if my very existence was tied to that place. A pawn in a game that spanned generations. I decided to confront my fears. Armed with nothing but a desperate need for closure, I returned to the house. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. It was as if the house recognized me, welcomed me. The shadows writhed more violently, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They called my name, beckoning me to the basement. There, the ritual circle pulsed with a malevolent energy, the word return glowing as if branded by fire. Against my better judgment, I stepped into the circle. The air around me crackled with power, and a vortex of shadows enveloped me. Visions assaulted me, of rituals, sacrifices, and a pact made with, as the days merged into nights, indistinguishable in the dim light that filtered through the decaying walls of the house. I began to lose all sense of time. The house, with its endless corridors and shifting rooms, became my entire world. But the most chilling part was the growing realization that I was not alone. Whispers turned into voices, clear and distinct, echoing through the halls. They spoke of past horrors, of pain and suffering that soaked into the very bones of the house. I could hear them, the tormented souls that had been trapped within these walls, and their pain was now mine to bear. I wandered the house aimlessly, my mind fraying at the edges. Each room revealed a new horror, a new piece of a macabre puzzle that was my family's legacy. In one room, the walls bled, the blood warm and fresh, as if the house itself was wounded. In another, mirrors reflected scenes of unspeakable acts, each reflection a window into a past atrocity. It was in the attic that I found the most horrifying revelation. Amidst the clutter and old furniture, there was a portrait covered in dust. When I wiped it away, my breath caught in my throat. The portrait was of me, but not as I was now. It was me, aged and twisted by time and darkness, my eyes hollow with a lifetime of horror. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The house wasn't just a prison. It was a living record of my family's curse, and I was the latest chapter. I was not just a victim. I was a continuation of this legacy of darkness. I knew then that I had to break the cycle. But how does one fight a curse that is woven into the very fabric of their being? I scoured the house, looking for answers, for any way to end this nightmare. In the depths of the night, as I roamed the halls, a plan began to form. The ritual circle in the basement, the epicenter of the house's power, might hold the key. If I could reverse the ritual, perhaps I could free myself and the souls trapped within. With determination fueling my every step, I descended into the basement. The circle pulsed with a malevolent energy, the symbols etched into the floor glowing with an unholy light. I stepped into the center, my heart pounding in my chest. I began to recite the words my great-grandfather had written in his journal, each syllable a challenge to the house's authority. The air around me grew colder, the whispers turned into screams, and the house shook as if in the throes of an earthquake. Then silence. The circle's glow faded, and for a moment I dared to hope. But then, a new horror revealed itself. The house began to collapse around me, the walls crumbling, the ceiling caving in. I had not broken the curse, I had unleashed it. In the chaos, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the figure from the painting, but now it was clear. It was me, or rather a version of me twisted by the curse. It smiled, a grotesque mimicry of humanity, and spoke in a voice that was both mine and not. "You cannot end what you do not understand." I ran, dodging falling debris, the house disintegrating around me. I burst out into the night, the house collapsing into a pile of rubble behind me. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, my body aching, but alive. As I lay there, looking at the ruins of my ancestral prison, a new terror gripped me. The curse was not contained within the walls of the house. It was in me, in my blood. The house was gone, but the legacy of horror lived on. And now, as I feel the darkness growing within me, I wonder what horrors I will bring into the world. The story of the house may have ended, but mine is just beginning. As I stood there, gazing upon the rubble that was once the cursed house, a searing pain erupted within me. It felt as though the very darkness of the house was clawing its way inside my soul, tearing and reshaping my very essence. I realized with a growing sense of horror that the destruction of the house had not ended the curse. It had merely transferred it to me, its final heir. The pain was unbearable, and as I writhed on the ground, my body began to contort in impossible ways, bones snapping and reforming. My screams filled the night air, a symphony of agony. When the transformation ceased, I was no longer human, but a grotesque manifestation of the house's legacy. Driven by a newfound malevolent instinct, I made my way back to town. The streets were deserted, the town asleep, unaware of the horror that had befallen me. I found myself outside my own home, watching through the window as my family slept peacefully, blissfully ignorant of the creature I had become. A twisted urge took hold of me, an insatiable hunger for fear and suffering. I entered the house, my movements no longer my own. The creature within me was in control now, and it reveled in the terror that followed. One by one, I visited each room, my family waking to a nightmare made flesh. Their screams were a chorus that echoed through the house, a sound that filled me with a perverse joy. The creature fed on their fear, growing stronger with each moment of terror. When dawn broke, the house was silent. I stood amidst the carnage I had wrought, the creature within me satiated for now. But as I looked at the destruction, a part of me, the human part that still lingered, was filled with horror and despair. What had I become? In a final act of defiance, or perhaps mercy, I fled the town, disappearing into the wilderness. I was a monster, a walking nightmare, and I could not allow myself to harm anyone else. The days turned into nights, and I roamed the land, a ghost of my former self, haunted by the memories of that night. The creature within me hungered for more, but I fought it, clinging to the last vestiges of my humanity. And now, as I write this, my control wanes, and the creature grows stronger. I leave this account as a warning, a tale of a curse that destroyed a family and created a monster. If you ever come across a whisper of a cursed house, or tales of a creature that stalks the night, remember my story. For the curse did not die with the house, it lives on within me, and I fear the night when I can no longer resist, and the creature takes over for good. And so I end my tale with a plea. Beware the echoes of horror, for they may just be closer than you think.